it up, renounce that spirit. You have to say, pride, I renounce you. That's what you do. You renounce it. Amen. That's how you ward it off, by renunciation. Renounce that spirit. Look at this man. It says here, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. You all see that? Now, let's back up and see what brought him there. Let's back up. Let's look at the 18th verse. O thou king, this is Daniel speaking. The Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all the people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over it whomsoever he will. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. Daniel is giving Belshazzar a history of his grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? Often when it was your great-grand or your great-great-grand, they would call it your immediate father. This is about Belshazzar, and Daniel is warning him because God is about to let him have it. Amen. God's about to give it to him. You can't play around with God, because Belshazzar, if you look in the beginning of the 5th chapter, look at the first verse, he made a feast, a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. And it says, while he tasted the wine, he commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father, which was not his real father, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem, the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king, he took these vessels that the kings, his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink. In other words, he took the sacred vessels that were in the house of God. Now remember, they had conquered nations. But now they target the only nation that served the true God whenever they did serve him, the Jews. And they took the sacred vessels from God's house. Rather than the vessels from those idol-worshiping houses, they took the vessels from the true God's house to make a mockery of him. In other words, we conquered the Jews with this great God that brought them out of Egypt. So we're going to drink out of his vessels. Let him do something about it. That's the attitude right there. See, it wasn't just because of the vessels. It's the attitude and the reason they drink from those vessels. And now he's making a mockery. Okay? And it said, let me back up. Verse 4. They drink wine and praised, while they're drinking wine out of the sacred vessels, they praised the gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone. While they're getting drunk and praising idol gods, something happened. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote like you write on this plaster right here on the wall. And it says, now this is what's amazing about it. This is what's amazing about it. Those fingers wrote against the candlestick right there where the candle was shining, because they used candles. They didn't have electric, you know that. So God made sure that they could see it, because the candlesticks was sitting on a stand, and some of them were even on the wall. And God started writing with his finger. Boom, 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 boom. He just writing right on the plaster. Now watch this here. It said, he wrote upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Now, nobody didn't see this but the king, the one who ordered them to drink out of the sacred vessels. Then the king's countenance changed. You know, in other words, his whole expression changed. He wasn't that drunk. Amen, somebody. He was not that drunk. It said his thoughts troubled him. Look at this here. The joints of his loins were loosed. That means his hips and knees began to knock. Can you see your hips knocking? That's what the translation says. His hips began to knock. He started jerking and shaking. His loins were loose. He couldn't be still. I mean, if I see a hand on the wall and nobody, I don't know, maybe I was jerked. And it said they smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers. Now he's bringing in these people full of demons, the Chaldeans and the soothsayers. The king spake and said to the wise men, these are all demon-possessed people of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the ruler in the kingdom, shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, and they couldn't read because that was written in a heavenly language. They couldn't make known to the king the interpretation of that handwriting, but there was a man there. An old gentleman was still there, Daniel. He had been there with the three Hebrews we preached about this morning, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were all friends. And for people who don't know this, there were other prophets there in that kingdom too. There were other men of God, Ezra, Nehemiah. They were all there. Even Esther came right behind Daniel. They was all around there together. And it says, this is the beautiful part about it. He was so troubled, and his countenance changes, and his lords are astonished because nobody can do nothing with this here right here. Now, the queen, let's go to the 10th verse. By reason of the words of the king and his lords came into the banquet house. So she wasn't there. The queen was a good girl. She wasn't there. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom, watch what she says now, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. Notice, not gods of gold and silver and stone, holy gods. And in the days of thy father, he said, light, listen to this already. In the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. In other words, Daniel was over all these people, even though he didn't believe in what they did. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. This woman is wise. She is wise. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel answered, this is the man of God, and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. Then he tells him what Nebuchadnezzar did before he became a donkey. Amen? Yeah. And tell him why he became a donkey too. because he was lifted up, amen, because of his power, his authority, his throne, his success is what lifted. That's what I'm warning the people of God about. Don't let position in life and money and prosperity and successes make you become lifted up. It could happen to any one of you, but resist it. If you're a preacher and God begins to use you, the first thing to guard against is the spirit of pride. That will be the first test. Pride will be the first test, because the moment God uses you and you see a miracle, you see somebody get healed, your head will want to swell. Your head. The moment God began to use you in preaching good and people holler and people are going to lift you up, they're going to glorify you. You can't stop them, but you can stay in a mental low place and don't become lifted up. Amen. Watch that spirit. Watch that spirit, because it's not you preaching, no way. You're the vessel, God's the empowerment. Amen. Let God be God. Amen. Somebody say amen. I'm going to finish this. Now Daniel read, let's go to the 24th verse. Let's go there. Then was the part of the hand sent from him. He's telling Belshazzar that was God's hand. And this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom. Now God is talking to Belshazzar. He has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Now, it's over. Now, listen to what happened. The same night, the Medes and the Persians attacked Babylon. Babylon was the central power, the great power of the East in that day. But there were two kingdoms united against Babylon. Babylon had one of the 8 wonders of the world, hanging gardens. The city was built so magnificently. And for those that don't know where Babylon is, it's in Iraq. It was built so magnificently that they would have chariot races on the walls of the city. You get that? That's how huge the city gates were. They weren't like gates we build up here with concrete and a few blocks. These things had roads up on the gates, roads up on your gates, where you can ride chariots without flipping off the side, because they were that wide. So there was nothing built in that day that could tear down those walls. So the people in the city, which was a huge city, I mean, you think of putting a gate around Miami, okay? Think about that. A huge city, people would put gates miles around. And nobody could get through, so they were proud. They were lifted up. They felt invincible. But God said, it's over. Your kingdom is finished. Now, no one could figure out how that was going to happen. Well, there was a river that ran through the center of Babylon, and that river is where they got their water. It was their water source. And they were able to cultivate and grow things inside the city and everything, so they didn't have to go outside the city for nothing. The water, the food, everything was homegrown. The military was the greatest one in the earth at that time. So who could beat us? Pride lifted them up, and God was ready for them to come down. He sent the Medes and the Persians. God sent them to take out that city because of wickedness. That's why. Because of wickedness. God was taking them down. So they took the river, the Medes and the Persians, and diverted it. They dug until the river went another way. Instead of the water going through Babylon, it went another direction. And so the riverbed dried up. They went, and see, the river went under the big, powerful gates. So they walked down in the riverbed, and their armies marched into the city and took it. That's how they took it. Amen. Let's give God a hand. That's how it was done.